Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Gemology for Schmucks. My name is Peter Nelson, and I'm here to guide you in everything you need to know about gemstones. Today we're going to be talking about an ancient gemstone called zircon. A lot of people confuse this ancient stone known as zircon with a modern synthetic stone called cubic zirconia. Cubic zirconia and zircon could not be any farther than each other. Occasionally they can resemble each other, but for the most part not really, and most of their properties are opposites. So more on CZ or cubic zirconia a little bit later, but first, zircon. What is zircon? Zircon is a super interesting mineral because it is one of the very few that can actually change its refractive index over time. Zircon is actually a mineral that contains a few radioactive elements, very, very small amounts of them. But because of this, there's a slow radioactive decay in zircon. And what happens with that radioactive decay is that the stone actually gets less dense and its refractive index gets lower. The bizarre thing is that when zircon is heat treated, which is a very common thing with zircon in order to change its color, sometimes from a nasty muddy brown into a bright blue. But once it is heat treated, it actually goes back into being a high refractive index stone. Mind-boggling! This is the only mineral that I know of that has this property, and it's certainly the only one that is commonly traded that has this property. All the other minerals that I know of, the refractive index will stay the same and the density will stay the same. It doesn't change over time. And when I'm talking about time, we're talking about beyond human lifetimes. This is not something you would worry about in your ownership of the stone. But enough of me geeking out about trace element chemistry. Let's get back to zircon. Zircon, otherwise known as zargun in some of the older languages, I believe it's Arabic, has been known since ancient times. And when it is untreated, zircon can come in a variety of colors. It can come in yellows like this right here. It can come in, a lot of them are brown like this. And then we have the incredibly rare red zircons. That's fancy. There are also green zircons. So there's no one color that can represent zircon entirely. But what most people know zircon as these days, and that is the most popular arguably, is this bright blue. The electric blue zircon is, to my understanding, exclusively caused by a heat treatment process. So certain stones that might be a muddy brown when they're mined out of the earth, once they are heat treated, they can turn this bright blue, or they can turn yellow, or they can turn colorless. So blue, yellow, and colorless are three common colors that we find in heat-treated zircon. Now this is a very typical and accepted treatment for zircon. And I believe it has that added benefit of making sure that all the radioactivity of the stone is cooked off. So with many gemstones, consumers are concerned about natural versus treated stones. And particularly in sapphire, that's a very important question to ask. But with stones like zircon, certain colors you just expect that they are heat treated. Other colors you can expect that they are not heat treated. But these neon or electric blues, and oftentimes the colorless zircons, are heat treated. But that does not mean that these are low value stones. The top color blue zircons can still fetch several hundreds of dollars per carat. What are the advantages of zircon? From an aesthetic point of view, you get really intense colors with very high luster. Zircon is one of those stones that we call over the limit, which means it's over the refractive index that our refractometer can actually test. So when you're looking at it with your eye, you'll see that very bright white reflection off of the surface of the facets. Zircon also has a higher than usual dispersion, so the light that comes scattering out of the stone after light has gone in and refracted around oftentimes will split into those rainbow colors, and you'll get flashes of red, yellow, green, etc., etc. So colorless zircon is sometimes used as a simulant for diamonds. So what are some of the most important properties of zircon that the gemologist needs to be aware of, or the avid collector? Zircon has a very unique absorption spectrum, which means that you can use a spectroscope like this, the handheld spectroscope, to look at zircon when there's a strong light in it, and you will see a very unique absorption spectrum. So with a spectroscope, you see all of the colors of the rainbow in a bar. And then certain stones will actually have certain bars of black, which means that those colors have been absorbed by the stone and not released back to it, which is why we don't see them with the spectroscope. Untreated zircon will oftentimes have what's called the jailhouse pattern absorption spectrum. And so over the entirety of the visible spectrum that we can see with this, which just looks like a rainbow, we'll see a lot of black bars, and those are all different colors that the zircon has absorbed and not released back to us, which is why we don't see them with the spectroscope. Heat-treated zircon will still have a very distinct pattern, but it's usually not all of those bars, it's usually just one bar over in the far red. And as long as you are a proficient user of the spectroscope, that's considered pretty diagnostic proof. Of course, that's combined with other information, but as long as you are certain that it has a high luster and you can witness doubling, which we may have talked about in this video over here, then you can be quite certain that this is, in fact, zircon. And that makes zircon a very easy stone to trade in. You don't need advanced machines. You can just put this in your pocket. How convenient! A lot of people confuse zircon with CZ, or as the Americans say, CZ, which is synthetic cubic zirconia. Most people just say cubic zirconia or CZ. They don't say synthetic, even though they're legally required to. Yeah, but some laws get enforced and some don't. Technically, cubic zirconia does exist in nature, but it's not gem quality, to my understanding. Everything that you're going to see inexpensively in top brands, which I won't mention because I don't want to get sued, is what you will see in jewelry like this. I made this while I was doing the 1-month Kickstarter at Lucy Walker's jewelry studio in Kuala Lumpur. And when you're dealing with stones like this that you may or may not be breaking because you're an entry-level jeweler, then it's nice to have something that's flashy but also really cheap. Cubic zirconia can be made in almost any color you can think of, and it still has a bright luster. So it's an excellent imitation of diamonds. Naturally, it's not going to have anywhere near the value of diamonds, but it does have a very high luster and a lot of dispersion. So there are some experienced diamond dealers that can't tell the difference between cubic zirconia and diamonds. And that's why it's valuable as a diamond dealer to have a pen tester like this, because cubic zirconia reacts very differently to a diamond using a pen tester like that. They have very different electrical and thermal properties. But anyhow, back to cubic zirconia and zircon. Cubic zirconia, almost any color you can think of. Zircon, not so much. There's a limited array, but some very neon and electric colors are still available. And it also has high dispersion and high luster. Now, what can we do to distinguish cubic zirconia and zircon just using our eyes? As I mentioned earlier, both have very high dispersion. That's not going to help us. Both of them have very high luster. That's not going to help us. But the spectrum can definitely help us because zircon has a spectrum and cubic zirconia does not. At least not one that's easy to see with the handheld spectroscope. Another thing is that cubic zirconia is cubic, just like a diamond, which means it does not split light. It's singly refractive. Zircon, however, especially if it's heat-treated zircon, has a very large birefringence. It's doubly refractive. And because those two rays travel at very different speeds, you can actually see what's called doubling in the stone, which I may have talked about in this video over here. Zircon is a prime example of doubling. CZ does not split light, and so it will not have this effect. It's the principles of crystallography. Anyhow, enough of the science, let's talk about value. Zircon kind of has two camps of thought. You've got treated zircon that is bought mostly for color, so the most expensive is going to be the sharp, electric neon blues, and other colors are going to descend in value from there. The blues in large carat sizes can still fetch several hundreds of dollars per carat. And the other camp is going to be the collectors of rare minerals. There are certain colors of zircon that are much rarer, certain types of greens and reds that are untreated, and these are collector stones because they contain rare earths. The same thing you may have heard about in the news that only occur in certain parts of the world that are used in making specialty electronics and things like that. Those occur inside of zircon. That's not the only place, mind you. So some collectors love the idea of possessing something that contains kryptonite. It may not actually be kryptonite, but, specialty minerals that don't exist anywhere else. Some people like stamps, some people like thorium and hafnium, and other elements that are named after, Norse mythological beings. Mythical. If you'd like to see some more pieces of zircon, you can head over to Nazo's channel where we've got dimensions and prices available on these stones. Aside from that, that's all I've got for today. So if you've got any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell all of your friends about it. And until next time, bye-bye.